to thank everybody for being able to actually be here for Chat with Matt. I want to go ahead and sort of explain some of the things that we're doing here. This is the first time that we're having a Chat with Matt that we're actually streaming online, so people can watch it online and maybe even on television in rerun format. But this is the first step towards us being able to have people participate with the Chat with Matt online too. And so we do not set up for it tonight. But hopefully by the next time we do one of these, then we can take your email questions, your chat questions, anything like that. And so kind of removing the barrier having to be physically here. But I thank the three of you that were able to be here tonight. So thank you for coming to chat. Hopefully more arrive as we keep on going. It's pretty informal. So I want to actually start. I do have a little bit of a slideshow presentation, but these are chats and chats by design. So I have a couple of items for you up front, and then we'll get into just kind of talking back and forth. As one can guess, the first topic for tonight is recreational marijuana. It's been the hottest topic in the city over the last, since basically November. Next up is Coolidge Highway Road Diet / restriping. It's got a lot of different names, but we'll see where it comes of it. I want to update on a couple of water main projects, what we're going to do with the infrastructure millage, and then, as always, it's up to you. And so recreational marijuana, we'll kick right off with that. We had our town hall last Tuesday, February 19th. It was actually my birthday. And so you got me out of spending birthday, blowing out cakes and being reminded of how old I am. So I'm very appreciative of that. We had about 120 attendees was our count. Popular opinion is absolutely leaning towards having facilities within the city with some limits, but not going the course of opting out and remaining opted out for forever. So the feedback's been phenomenal. Well over 1,100 responses online. Again, 120 people at a town hall is something we welcome, but we don't always see. So we know we hit on a good topic. The next opportunity, the city council has talked about having a work session on April 1st. That's going to be their within their regular meeting for April. So we're going to have two upcoming city council meetings, March 4th and March 18th. But we won't be doing the deep dive on it until we comes back in the form of a work session. And the issue is absolutely open to citizens' comments. And Jason, I know you've been really active on this topic, and I appreciate your continued interest on it. As said earlier, one of the big takeaways from that was just kind of how little we know about this. And the state is working to infill and working as fast as they can on it. It was mentioned earlier, they're formed work groups on it, and so I did throw my hat in the ring on being part of the municipality-specific work group. In case Laura's watching tonight, I hope I am selected for that. I like to bring Berkley's experiences so far to the statewide perspective. I think Berkley being a mostly residential community on a major corridor, I think we have a lot of lessons that we could have specific to Berkley that would be useful for a bunch of different communities across the state. And so, again, I hope I'm selected to represent, the small to medium-sized communities for that work group. I'm not sure what their process is on there, but I'm happy to do so. Any surprises? Any thoughts on the town hall? I know you'd said about having sort of industry professionals. I know that there were a couple there, but as a potential invitee to maybe a future meeting on the topic.
But I was corresponding with Vivian regarding the town hall because she was out of town. She had to miss it, so I agreed to send her a recap on the whole event.
Okay.
And that was her first question when I sent her my first thoughts on it was there anyone from the industry there? I said, no, gosh, I didn't even think of that at first. I was like, that's right, yeah, there really should have been, because it escaped my mind in terms of the presentation. I was like, oh yeah, we only really kind of got to that side. And then I've been tracking Royal Oak's plans for the whole process. I know they're planning on getting a bit of a broader group for the presentation. But as far as popular opinion is leaning toward, what are the numbers?
Last I saw was 60-40 in favor with some limitations.
And as far as the online poll goes, how do we know who's taken that poll? It's just an online poll.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that's come up a couple times. We don't. The straightforward, direct answer on that is we don't. Just like any of the town halls we had, any of the paper surveys that we had at that meeting, could have been picked up and filled out by anybody. So it's useful in giving the indication of where kind of general sentiment's at. But I wouldn't hold it to a scientific standard of it being X amount of reliability. Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's not how we're going to, decide
Sure,
legislature.
sure.
Like that, but I just, as far as if we're trying to get information as to what the citizens want, but we don't actually know if this is what the citizens want because we don't know who's taking their poll. So that's all. It's just, as far as gathering sentiment goes.
Yeah, that's why I know City Council has had a lot of conversations, a lot of people reaching out to them, a lot of residents taking it upon themselves to say, I'm really interested in this, or my concerns are that. And so it's part of it's just one of the tools in the toolbox. You're right. We're not going to make public policy based solely on, the SurveyMonkey results. But we sort of, and we were looking at it as we were putting it together, we kind of had the same thoughts, was that you hold a town hall, you really don't know who's there from a resident versus non-resident standpoint too. So, right. And so the only way to really do that would be, actually put this on a ballot and have, all the safeguards that exist for like a local election to actually find out what people want. But then you get into what's the question. Do you want it yes or no? But then you get into types and how many and licenses and what do you think?
Retail versus a grower.
Grower versus producer versus transporter, yeah.
Numbers is difficult. If you look at what Pontiac did
Yeah.
with their dispensaries, the results of that were clear as mud.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that the city really just needs to kind of take a stance on it and run with it, and then if the citizens want to challenge that in any way, they deem it unfit, then there's certainly provisions within Prop 1
Yeah.
that they can take to do that. But if there's at least one, from what you're gathering so far, because I'm sure besides just the SurveyMonkey results, you're getting a lot of emails and feedback,
Sure.
Either the mayor, the council members themselves directly, or through the comments email that you guys set up through the website. So you probably have a general idea of overall what it is the citizens want at this point in terms of number, what they're expecting in terms of they don't want, a tester or a grow house. They're looking at dispensaries. That seems to be the overwhelming consensus so far.
Yes, most of the conversations I've had have been specifically to the retail part of it. I don't have a lot of people that sort of expand the conversation past that so far.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you look at the survey itself, every
Yeah.
single one of the options presented as far as business types get more than 60% approval. So the approval is high for all of them, but obviously with retail, that's up there at like 98%. So that's what everyone's thinking. So if we just set a policy, with the work study that's coming up in April and all that, where they say we want 3 dispensaries, or we'll allow up to.
Sure.
Then if the citizens say absolutely not, then they can gather the signatures, which is only 452, I think.
I'm not sure the exact number offhand.
Ballot,
Yeah.
question on there as far as like banning them, or saying no, we want 5, or we want unlimited, or whatever the amount might be. Because otherwise, that's what the citizens are going to do anyway. If you say no, we're just going to sit on our hands and do nothing. It's only 450 signatures to say I want 3.
Right.
And it's only 450 signatures from some other group to say we want 5, and then it becomes Pontiac. And
Yeah, it's going to be one of the interesting conversations moving forward is how often is this going to be revisited? That's one reason when we were talking about doing this originally in November is we originally proposed an opt-out ordinance, sort of with an eye towards waiting for the regulations to come out, waiting to see how it's administered, how it's litigated. Never really thinking that this is going to be the city's permanent stance on it. But with the ability, and maybe even you'll get people sort of pushing in that direction, ballots, how often this is going to end up being on a ballot from here until, whenever. Yeah.
What was the thinking behind opt-out being the first reaction?
Yeah, just that. Well, it's a wait and see approach. So it's never a permanent. basically, city council can't bind the hands of any future council. City council, even in the same meeting, they could vote to opt it out and then vote to opt back in. It was basically take a wait and see approach. And so we'll go ahead and opt out now, and then let's see how the dust settles, and then we'll talk about, what our next steps look like. Maybe probably, as council members said, doing it right away without having a conversation first, ultimately was not, they're much happier to go this route. So now we can have a conversation about, okay, so it turns out we're interested in this, what form is it gonna take? Yes, ma'am.
I have a lot of problems with it. First of all, that survey, I don't think it's useful at all. But I noticed that if you answer, no, you don't want it, you don't get to answer anything about, okay, well, what, those middle questions. You don't get to have a say in terms of that. And there was just a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I don't think it's indicative at all of what the real sentiment is. And if I understand it correctly, we only have until like December to opt out. Otherwise, you're locked in.
No, so the city can opt out at any point it wants to. For us, the December is a deadline because when the state starts issuing licenses, if we don't have any local parameters, then it's just going to be, all you have to do is satisfy the state standards, and you can go basically anywhere that would fit what you're applying for. So if you're a retail establishment, then anywhere retail works, anywhere retail is currently permitted in the city, then you're allowed by right to go in there. The same thing would be true for producers and growers and things like that. Producers are a little bit easier because you probably slide to like the industrial areas that we already have zoned. Growers would be kind of an open question. I don't know if that's considered to be light industrial or not. So for us, if we're going to go the route of permitting it, having the local framework done, or at least have bought ourselves some time, is why we feel like December is a bit of a deadline for us. And so if we're getting close, so if we just go ahead and say we opt out and say, all right, we're going to spend the next year developing the framework locally, our local framework for this. Then we'd opt out with a clear deadline in place to say we need to have this done in 12 months.
But even if you opt out, you could still work that whole time.
Yes.
In terms of creating an ordinance to satisfy all your future needs. You don't have to pass it immediately.
True.
You can work on it, so it's in place.
Right.
My concern about not opting out before it kicks in is that we don't know what kind of revenues it's going to bring. We don't know what the city would get. People think that, oh yeah, we got to do it so that we can get all this windfall profit. And I don't see that happening. It's going to create a lot more expenses for the city. And it's quite possible in my mind, at least for the first few years, that the expenses might outweigh the income or the revenue, or at least make that revenue so small that it's not that useful.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people actually, I've had about a dozen or so people sort of preface the conversation by saying, I don't think it should be a revenue conversation. It's just, it's a policy question. Should we, shouldn't we? Is this a good match for the city based on, the interest of the population as a whole?
But a lot of people seem to be thinking that it's the money. We got to get that money now, or else we're out in the cold.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't foresee it being a windfall by any means. But if we do participate, if we do end up having a healthy proportion of the overall licenses, then there's some revenue associated with that. Sure. But I'm kind of with you. I don't foresee a windfall per se.
I think a lot of people are, falling into the pot for potholes.
Yeah.
It sounds good. It's a very catchy slogan.
Right. It's the pro people finding any positive they can to
justify it.
It's one that I completely agree with. It's going to be insignificant if it is anything. However, it's an irrelevant conversation as far as I'm concerned too. In that, there's I I think it looks like there's something going into the old Victorian tea room on 12 Mile, some kind of business. So no one's asking how much money is that going to bring to the city coffers. It's just that's a business that's going in there.
Yeah.
Same with, a dispensary that's going to go in. I'm not concerned with how much money are we going to get from special taxes. It's just, it's a business that's going to go in.
The only problem is the tea room, they're not gonna generate a lot of expenses for the
I
city.
don't know that a dispensary would generate a lot of expenses for the city either.
Well, there's
though.
policing,
What-
there's
assuming that
regulatory.
there's an additional need for police on top of the actual revenue that would be generated. There's also the licensing fee of $5,000 a pop per
Sure.
year.
Yeah.
Which could be
We could
just
set
handed
that somehow.
directly to the police department for any kind of oversight or regulatory needs as they deem. But as it stands, so the cops would spend 10 less minutes sitting at a four-way stop sign waiting for someone to slowly roll it, and they can drive past the dispensary at 12 Mile instead. It's not like we're that far from the core district between the police department. So if there's some kind of problem that breaks out, it's not like that's going to draw resources. Plus, that onto itself is a huge discouragement for anyone trying to break into the place or rob the place because they know the police station is 2 blocks down the street.
Yeah, if you know anything about Berkeley and our response times.
It's one thing when they knock over a dispensary in Detroit because they know the response time is 40 minutes to an hour for a robbery. In Berkeley, it's going to be 2 minutes.
If that.
But most businesses aren't cash
KFC Bank,
carrying.
that's all they do is dispense cash. That's their sole purpose.
This is why the revenue portion of this ends up being a hard conversation because it's a lot of speculation. Either way, speculation on how much money is gonna be sent to the city. It's speculation on how much oversight and effort it's going to take to make sure that these remain safe, contributing members. So, sometimes sometimes it's not the best to be the first one to jump into it. So we can look to some of the other states on this, thankfully. And there's, I think I mentioned this during the town hall. There's a lot of anecdotal stories that can be cobbled together to paint almost any picture you want. And so we're trying to get a clear picture of, electrical safety, fire safety, have what effect does that cash-only business have, building stuff as well. There's some stories out of there where, like, the amount of moisture generated to the grow facilities ends up being a mold issue if the ventilation isn't proper. And so some of the national codes have actually done quite a bit of work to try to catch up with this. I know Colorado, being the first one to jump into this, had to, they have a section of their, if I'm remembering this correctly, they have a section of their mechanical code actually trying to address like high moisture grow facilities and how to keep a proper code in place to prevent the health portions of this.
But now, is that the responsibility of the city to go in? Like, there's got to be health concerns, health department concerns, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so
Inspection fees. I mean, is there going to be? What is the burden on the city for all this?
We already do biannual inspections of our commercial facilities, and we expanded a couple years ago, and that's both owned and leased facilities. So we're already on a inspection cycle with all of our commercial facilities anyway, and so this just becomes part of what we're looking at while we're there, is making sure that the ventilation and the plumbing and the electrical are all remain up to code.
And twice a year is good enough for that kind of
Every
a
other
business?
year. Every other year.
Oh,
No.
every other
Yeah,
year?
so
Is that good enough?
we could choose to make that an annual inspection for, if we do have just a limited number of those facilities, we could choose to have an annual inspection on that if we need to as well. Fire marshal can enter a building at any point and do a surprise inspection at any point they want to. So again, that might be part of our oversight task. Again, if there's one thing I can be clear about in this is the unknowns. I feel a little bit like Donald Rumsfeld when I start talking about this with the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. But again, this is why it's not, I think from a municipality standpoint, it's not just as easy as putting it on a ballot and having people vote. There's there's a process for how people would open up the facility. There's a process for how we regulate that facility. There's a lot of questions for us here that we need to try to answer at some point.
And
And
we just
there's-
don't know. I mean,
don't know.
we
Right,
don't know
right.
what the state's gonna mandate.
Right, which is, again, like, so why, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, I really hope I can contribute to, a work group and start to talk about those kind of things with Laura, and I'm glad they're opening the field up to get some of that conversation so that we can discuss what it looks like for a municipality when the state says, take your license, you're all set on our end, what that means for a municipality moving forward.
Right, it seems to me that it's jumping the gun to get into it without having all these known, without knowing what the state's gonna mandate, what the law is gonna look like. And if you can opt out now, work on it for the future, and then see, oh, well, this is what it is. This is what the law says. Now do we want to actually go forward? How do we want to tailor our law? What do we want to do? I mean, otherwise, seems like we're kind of stuck. And then another question is, if we don't opt out now, we can opt out anywhere down the road?
At any point, we can opt out at any point. If there are already licensed facilities in there, they become, legally non-conforming.
But you're stuck with them.
Well,
Till they decide to move on.
Yeah, but they could very well be, contributing to the overall betterment of the city. So I wouldn't necessarily say stuck, but we could say, this is enough. We have enough as we need, as we can support for the city. These are great businesses, but any more might be outside of our, abilities to manage well. And then,
Right.
you opt out at that point.
If you don't like it at all, you can't just kick them out.
No.
With an all-cash business, and you may not know this, but with an all-cash business, they can still deposit at PNC, right?
No, PNC is a federally insured bank. So any federally insured banks, they won't accept those deposits.
I knew that they couldn't give them business loans and
Yeah.
things like that.
So
'cause
they're-
Can't even handle the-
No, there's
the money.
reporting.
No, so there
Even
are
their lawyers can't even, it's crazy.
Yeah, so there are state chartered banks that develop in the other states that are able to do those things. It comes down to the FDIC, the federally insured.
And we've got 7 or 8 state chartered banks
Yeah.
in Michigan,
The
if that.
dispensary that just opened up in Commerce, they're working with a bank, but he won't say who out of fear of them getting in trouble, but he does have a bank that he's banking with. So he has access to a lot of those protections as far as payroll and everything, as far as paying his people.
So are you saying that state banks don't have the regulatory obligations that federal banks do?
If they're FDIC, the way I understand it is if they're FDIC insured, then they will not, they're not able to take money and
That
have
doesn't make
marijuana clients.
I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense to me because there's reporting requirements for all banks. I thought it would include state banks. There's IRS
Right, and
reporting
they
requirements.
still have to do all those, and I believe even the business have to pay federal taxes on it, but the FDIC, the federally insured banks are not allowed to handle marijuana monies, because it's still illegal at the federal level.
Right, but why could the states? That's why I don't understand how they're,
My understanding of it is because by people voting this in, it changes the state's view on it.
the state's view, but what about the federal? The
federal
IRS,
still wants the taxes, but they won't insure it.
$10,000 has to be reported,
Yeah.
so.
That, I would have to consult an expert on it, but that's what's I've seen in other states like this, is federally insured banks aren't able to touch that cash. Only state chartered banks are able to do so.
And isn't Laura currently working on developing their own, internal state banking?
Yeah, it's part of it, yeah.
For this issue?
That's part of what they need to address now, is what their laws, probably to make sure that they don't run awry of federal reporting standards and IRS standards too.
Right, but I heard there were problems with that too.
When
Nothing goes smooth.
having two different levels of government have two different stances on marijuana is going to cause issues.
And the federal is supreme. So,
Yep.
That sounds like a bunch of headaches for the prospective business owner, nothing that concerns us as a city.
Yeah, thankfully we have our own challenges to face on this.
Right.
But, yeah, unless, you know, a state chartered bank is looking to open in the city, you know, then we have a bunch of questions on whether or not we, you know, how we allow this. But yeah, we have our own set of issues to overcome, and I look forward to hearing Laura talk about how they intend to navigate banking regulations. Yep, yep.
So what's wrong with waiting? That's what I do.
No, and I'm not taking waiting off the table. Council very well may take that exact stance to say, we have a lot of work here to do, let's opt out until X point and spend that time figuring out all these questions. You know, and basically it becomes a prolonged work period where we set as many standards as we feel are appropriate in Berkeley before we sort of open that door back up and say, you know, come one, come all, you know, here's our process, here's how we intend to regulate it.
So is it basically just a way for you guys at the city to stop getting calls from prospective businesses wanting to move in? But if we just put the prohibition in place now, that's just a way to get the calls to stop while we actually work on the problem? Because
I don't think the calls will stop. Yeah. No, my experience on these things have been, like, even with the medical marijuana, I wasn't with Berkeley when that was voted on, but I was with a different community. The calls keep coming, because as you're developing regulatory framework, there's a whole host of industry professionals who would love to work with you on developing those. And so, no, this isn't a way of just getting less calls by any means, because they still come no matter what. This is just a way of us, it basically provides cover and the ability to get some questions answered while we're developing our own process. So it's an umbrella from the rain.
But again, with the rain's not going to start coming until December anyway, so there's really no reason for us to opt out right now, because the calls won't stop and nothing can happen right now anyway. So even if we opt out now, it won't make any difference.
Yeah.
As opposed to if we opt out in December when the regulations will
That's
supposedly
another
come into effect.
that's another avenue available to us too, is say, you know, come probably October and say, all right, how are we doing? How much longer do we think it's going to be? Are we going to wrap up before these things come out, or do we need to actually essentially use the ordinance like a moratorium?
Right.
But the reason we don't talk about a moratorium on this, like we would with a lot of other businesses, is the proposal one was specific that it has to be enacted by ordinance, and moratorium is done by resolution. So just in order to be safe as possible. But, you know, what you're talking about is absolutely a viable approach as well, is since the state's not handing out licenses now, and it won't be for some time, either way, we're going to use between now and December to answers like all the questions we've been talking about here, whether or not we do so with an ordinance, or whether or not we do so and then enact an ordinance. You know, it's a policy question. So, is everybody?
Either way, it's gonna be worked on before the state starts
Right.
issuing licenses, so.
Yeah, it's definitely not a, you know, fingers in your ears and start saying la 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 kind of thing. No, it's either way we're going to be working on an answer and standards that fit the community.
How can you do that without knowing what the state law is going to be? That's what I don't get. I mean,
there's some things that we can answer, like limits and where and type of facilities and things like that. But there are going to be some open questions on that are only going to be answered by the state. So I'm hoping that they publish well ahead of handing out the license, giving us time to sort of react and infill if we need to. But
sounds like they're working on a very short time frame as well, though. I mean, I don't know that I would expect it.
Yeah, I was surprised at at least the public statements that they've made, how confident they feel that they can get through this. They've been citing the fact that, you know, medical marijuana preceded recreational marijuana, and they've done some framework on this topic ahead of time. But you're right. To me, if I was trying to put statewide regulations in place, December doesn't feel like a long time either. But they've been publicly very confident, even with switching administrations.
Well, the idea is that they're basically just going to copy paste the medical,
Yeah,
the recreational, and then make a few tweaks where as needed.
But we're years out, and there's still new rules and new litigation specific to medical too. So I think they're probably thinking they're going to take it most of the way, and then deal with legal challenges as they come up, and administratively put in what they can, and then the rest can be litigated over time.
But even with as far as the calls were concerned earlier, as I mentioned, so for the first 2 years, come December, once the regulations are in place, or if they don't, they fail to do the job and it's up to us, whatever. The first 2 years, it's only people who've already been approved for medical licenses that will be considered for recreational, correct?
I've heard that, but I
That
don't.
was at the town hall.
Yeah, and I know Chris had said that, there were some questions about some of the other type of facilities, though, that don't have a medical counterpart.
Micro business is the one
Yeah,
that doesn't have a counterpart, sure.
Mhm.
Obviously, the
But-
state would have to come up with regulation for that, but
Right.
it would just be, that would only be accessible to
But
license holders.
production and transport, I don't think have a medical, production does? Okay, all right. I thought, retail or dispensaries had the retail, counterpart, growers had, easily identified counterpart.
The classes are all the same.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I've heard that. So we may have, maybe even some additional time.
Right, but I mean, if we already know what those regulations look like at the recreational level, we already have a pretty rough idea of what to expect if we have a dispensary in town. If we look at the regulations that are already in place for, medicinal.
Yeah.
As far as, regulating signage and things like that, as far as where they can be located, we know we can zone those as we wish, more or less. So as far as recreational ones, there aren't that many unknowns floating out there.
And, yeah, Laura has said over and over and over again, they're gonna pattern one after the other.
Sure.
Do you have any idea why they decided to, on medical marijuana, you have to opt in, and recreational, you have to opt out? Why is there that discrepancy, do you know?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm not sure what the thought process on it was, and if it was just by, what I'd heard leading up to November was that the developers of Proposal 1 said, doing nothing was enough, and now they actually wanted local governments to take an action on something, versus just being able to sort of set it off to the side and take no action, and that being enough to automatically opt you out.
I think it was to spur conversations like this and the reaction that you got from the citizens.
It worked then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was what it was.
Okay.
It's really just to get the citizens engaged if the towns were acting in ways that people didn't like, or vice versa.
Sure.
Even with the way that the petition process works, it's all kind of designed to make sure that the majority of the will is really what's getting pushed through versus any one person's preconceived notions or anything like that around this particular topic.
Sure. Well, effective in that regard for sure.
You saying there might be some pre-existing biases on this issue?
No, of course not. As there are with all issues.
Everything.
The bike lane's
Yeah.
next.
Everything. Yeah. Hey, nice segue.
I
There we
don't know.
go.
I've heard
All
some
right.
people think that if this is about whether you can do it in the city as opposed to business, maybe, I don't know how widespread that thinking is.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with several people to say, why can't I just walk down, why can't I just enjoy it? And it's like, no, we're not touching that whatsoever. It's just where you get it from.
You can't walk down the street.
So,
Well, yeah, it's not, that's like alcohol. You can't walk down the street with a red Solo cup either.
yeah, I was wondering exactly, because we have to wait for the state law, we don't know how restrictive or non-restrictive we can be.
Oh, we know that part. That's all set.
Not really. I mean, that.
You can't smoke in public.
Well, I know. I'm talking about the licensing for the retail part
Oh,
of it.
they
Yeah,
did put that a little
that
bit,
is vague
yeah.
language for sure. That is vague language as far as how restrictive we can be on the businesses themselves.
As far as letting on-site consumption occur.
I mean, do they, I don't use, and I'm not savvy to all this sort of stuff, but are they gonna open up smoking bars?
Not anytime soon.
I mean, is that a possibility?
Not in the. I haven't heard it discussed as being an option anytime soon. Like it's not going to be like Amsterdam where you can go in a cafe and.
Can't go to a hookah bar.
So, yeah. So, but what it will be sold with and what it won't be sold with is still also a question. If walk into a liquor, I haven't heard the Liquor Control Commission say definitively, yeah, it's,
I think in Prop 1, there is specific language, you can't sell it at a place that sells tobacco.
okay.
At least that much.
Yeah. But if you can get it at packaged liquor and packaged recreational marijuana can be sold together, I haven't heard Liquor Control Commission say yet.
But then the liquor stores themselves would have to choose if they want to sell marijuana or if they want to sell cigarettes. That's an interesting choice for them to make.
Yeah.
Well, what about selling it like Rite Aid or, a convenience store or something like that?
They probably have to make the tobacco choice too if they haven't already decided not to sell, but, good question. I don't know.
It's
I
still
haven't heard
get licensed and everything like that, though, and right now, the licensure for recreational requires like $500,000 in the bank just to say hello and sign up for medicinal, so.
Yeah.
I don't know that everyone's gonna be knocking down the door to see selling it on every corner.
No, and I don't know if, like say, some of your national brands are gonna wanna do it either.
I don't know how they would do the reporting either
Probably-
with the
they
cash
probably have-
business.
Yeah, they're probably scratching their heads the same way and wondering how to do that too. So, it's fun. It's a fun conversation to have, it's,
I don't
but
think
I
it's
hate not, I don't like not knowing, it's just not the way I'm wired. And so, again, the regulations can't come out fast enough. I'd love to know how this is gonna go. I'd love to kind of look at my way forward machine and go out 5 years and see after the administration lays it out, after, it's litigated, after the federal has some more time to evaluate this,
Right, but
where this is all
we're
going.
talking about jumping in before all that.
Maybe not. I mean, like I say, we're not sure.
A lot of people, that's what they want.
Yeah, a lot
They
of
don't
people,
want to
yeah.
even think about, a lot of people don't know about business in the first place, any kind of business. So they don't think about those kinds of things.
Sure. Some people are just happy being able to just buy it, and that was all they wanted proposal one to do, and some, I don't know. There's again, you can find every single opinion at all on this, but we have to try to wade through that. As local governments, we have to try to wade through that and figure out how do you set a structure up to respond to it, that balances what people want versus, what gives us the ability to make sure that this remains a healthy use and
You have to
it's well
protect
regulated in the
people.
city.
You have to protect the kids,
It all falls on us to do,
neighborhoods.
for sure. The state, I'm sure it's something that they think about. Colorado actually went back and, specific to edibles, they went back and put together some legislation that restricted what types of foods and candies that marijuana can go into. So, again, someone's already blazed that trail at least. We've got those early warnings, specifically, like say candies, gummy bears, whatever that would be attracting to a child. They had to make sure that they didn't attract the child into eating an edible, which could have harmful effects too. So, but thankfully, say Michigan's not the first to jump into here, but locally we still have a lot of questions too.
Yeah, a brownie doesn't have a neat little, what do you call those tags on them?
Yeah, even if it did,
Well, they're packaged and they're labeled with the
Yeah.
dosage and everything like that.
Yeah, but if they're not wrapped,
right.
If someone takes it out of the wrapping, sure.
Yeah. So again, I have 4-year-olds. Thankfully, we're out of the put everything in my mouth phase. But you have to. There's a lot of. You have to be a good parent too, and you have to make sure that something that could be harmful to your kid stays out of your reach of your kid.
well, I know, but taking them to school, kids can somehow get a hold of them and take them to school. And it's not like a cigarette where you can see exactly what it is,
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about that.
I understand.
Or a joint where you could see too.
Yeah, but the edibles.
Yeah. I don't even know if joints are still in or not, or if there's some
Oh, they sell them at the dispensary.
new and different ways to. There are better ways than just light. Like you smoke something, it's not good for you anyway. But if there are, whether it's vaping it or eating it or topical applications, if there are better ways of doing it.
Guess I was aging myself
lighten up
using
a
that
joint.
term.
I don't know. So, all right. Want to touch on Coolidge Road diet a little bit too. One other big conversation topic in the city. Just kind of a status of where we are right now. Berkley, the DDA board went out to bid. We went out to Mitten. Did find a contractor, PK Contracting out of Troy. Cost actually came in a lot less than we originally were projecting. The total cost of the DDA is going to be about $72,000. for the restriping of Coolidge. As we talked about, where we're targeting May, it's going to be weather dependent on where within May that this will take place. But since the work on Coolidge is wrapped up that Consumers was doing, we're in our window now. We'll start to take the baseline studies on the side streets and see what speeds look like now, what traffic volumes look like right now on normal conditions. And then we'll use that to gauge after the May restriping, and it's literally just, advanced form of paint on the ground, how it affects side streets, how it affects travel times, and how people are acclimating to it. Like anything else that's new, I'm sure the first couple months after are going to be different and a head scratcher and may cause some issues. Just with I'm used to going down Coolidge at this speed, posted speed aside, I'm used to going this speed and it taking me X amount of time to get to work every day or home every day, and now it's different. But that we'll get into a stabilization period. We'll be measuring. There are big matrix that we came up with of several items. Be measuring those throughout, and we'll check back in after 12 months. It'll be May of 2020. Check back in, take a look at our data, and assuming that there's no issues from a traffic safety standpoint, then we'll extend another 12 months out
I thought
for
it was a 6-month checkpoint.
6 month and 12 month. So,
okay.
so we'll there's measurement periods, and then there's the traffic safety evaluations after 12 months, but we do have a 6-month evaluation period too, where we're actually going to do recheck all of our baseline studies and see how they've changed. Do it again at 12 months and see if there's anything that can be discerned from the trends. And then after 12 months, if there's no traffic safety concerns, extend it out another 12 months so that we can take some of the economic data from it and use, and that, it's an interesting study on that, because sort of 12 Mile will be our kind of baseline study for economic data too. And so we'll be able to kind of compare how the two function now. Because you're always running the risk of there being some recession waiting in the wings, and so the economic data for 24 months doesn't look as good, but state of Michigan's doesn't look all that good, or the nation's doesn't look all that good. But it's nice to have 12 Mile being a pretty good comparable on that.
When you say economic data, you mean the individual businesses, if their revenues go up, or
Yes.
traffic? I mean,
Yeah, that's part
how
of
are
it.
you going to determine it? Is it monetary? Is it people, bodies walking in and out of stores?
On our matrix has several of those items. So it's got the economic performance, it's got street traffic, it's got, like I say, use of the pedestrian facilities in general. So it's not sort of a one-off thing. There's I don't forget the number offhand, but it's like 24 standards or something like that we'll be looking at.
I looked at them, but they looked awfully subjective.
We, thankfully, this is one of those areas where someone's gone ahead of us too. New Mexico actually developed the bulk of that matrix, and they've been using it in for their evaluations on these types of projects for quite a while. So,
But it depends
I know
on.
I've heard that people say, oh, it's all very subjective, but there's a way to remove a lot of the subjectivity and a lot of the biases. And like I said, New Mexico, their DDOT, their Department of Transportation, has been successful in using this as an audit. So we were happy to find something we could rely on.
Are they doing it with comparable sized cities, or is it just?
They do it. This is standard practice for their road for their 4-to-3 conversions and across the board. So
Any size city.
yeah, any size city they use it for.
I have several questions.
Sure,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Oh God, it just left me. Well, one of my questions is the traffic lights. Does the city have control over the timing of those lights?
We it's a yes or no. So we put together this. The county ultimately has those. They're the one that can actually do the timings themselves. But part of the study included the engineers putting together the formula for how those traffic lights would go. So we sent them to them, and they'll upload them when we get the traffic done. So while we're not the group that actually goes in and physically changes those,
No,
we
but I mean,
provided to them with the timing sequence that optimizes that street, optimizes Coolidge, and they'll take those and they'll put them in.
and they'll go along with it,
They're-
or
yeah,
they
so
resist
we got
it?
them to them well in advance. Actually, like, it was a couple weeks ago, I think I saw them go over to the road commission from the traffic engineers, so they've got time to take a look at it themselves, make sure that, you know, there were no flaws in the modeling or anything like that, and be ready to go when the road gets restricted.
The cost of these studies that you're talking about, and even, there must be a cost to sending this to whoever you said.
Yeah.
Is that included in the 72,000?
No, but that's specifically for the restriping itself. We've
So
been
it's a little bit misleading, because that's not the total cost to the DDA.
Well, let me tell you, the group that we're using this, the TIA, the Transportation Improvement Association, where the city's already been members of them. We actually have a subscription membership with them, and they're the ones that are doing the light timing, the baseline studies. So they get 0.5% of the money that we get from the state through Act 51. That's the subscription fee for all the communities that are members of TIA. We pay that annually no matter how much we use them. If we use them for one study, if we use them for 10 studies. So there's actually not an additional cost to this particular item here, outside of, you know, to say it's misleading is not true, because we're going to be members of TIA no matter what.
So if you're a member, you don't have to pay for the services?
No. No, it's automatically part of being a member. It's the perks of membership, as the old commercial used to say.
72,000, is that including the engineering cost?
No, so that's what I wanted to.
That was $8,000.
Yeah, so leading, the work that we've done leading up to this,
Right.
the DDA's been funding like engineering studies and things like
Yeah,
that.
they approved the engineering bid at the last meeting.
Yeah, so putting together the specs and things like that got us to the 72,000.
Sure. So it would be 80 altogether with the engineering cost.
Yeah, I have to go back and look, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
But no, so the 72,000 is literally the paint and the restriping, like I said.
And
So
But the
coming up to
baseline-
that point,
The studies are done under the our membership with TIA.
Right.
The engineering to get to this point, to do the bid specs and things like that, that was funded separately by the DDA as well. So that's not I want to be
That's
specific on that.
part
That's
of
not
the cost.
comprehensive of the entirety of the project. That was the bid that came back from PK Contracting to actually restripe the street.
I think people would be interested in knowing the full amount.
Okay.
Otherwise,
It's
it does.
certainly nothing we hide by any means. It's, you know, it's all accounted for and.
Well, I'm sure it's accounted for, but I'm just saying to the public doesn't get into the accounts. But, you know, I mean, we want to see the total cost. You know, if you plan on doing this to 11 Mile, I mean, it's important to know that kind of stuff.
Like I say, Jason's been at the last couple of meetings, and he's probably pretty accurate. We're probably up around 80,000 or so with the engineering cost that got us to this point.
Was the bid, because it was
Yeah.
between
That's what I'm
HRC
thinking, right.
and Spalding Decker.
Mhm.
Spalding.
Wasn't the original estimate like 100,000?
Yeah, we actually thought the engineering estimates for when we were out to bid for this were at about 114,000 or so, and so we were happy that they came in lower. But sometimes you do engineering estimates high just because you want to be conservative. Yeah, you want to be conservative when you're going to budget.
Now, I was down in Oak Park last night for the meeting with Spalding Decker there.
Yeah.
So as far as the 11 Mile, if we were to go ahead and agree to that between all three cities,
Mhm,
all
mhm.
agreement there, where does that money come from? Because DDDA is not involved with the 11 Mile.
Right.
So.
Right. So
who's paying for
that.
that?
So
Who's coming to that?
my projection would be that they would go out for another grant for that and try to get like a road funding grant through SEMCOG or through state or federals. So that would be, the engineering would be done, the project would kind of be like, yes, check mark, it's shovel ready at a moment's notice, and then they would start pursuing road funding grants for that.
But grants don't usually fund the whole project.
There would likely be a match. Like I say, that's what's happened in, like we're talking about we have tri-party monies in 2020 to resurface 12 Mile. That's been a project that we've been discussing for quite a while. There's a city portion of that too, yeah.
So this would come out of the general fund or out of some sort of DDA fund?
No, can't come up
I
from
mean,
the DDA.
not
Yeah.
DDA, I meant DPW. main roads?
It would depend on what the total costs were. We would try to, it would either be general fund, or it would be your major local road funds, but we're a ways away from that.
Yeah, I know that's
Yeah.
down the road.
Right,
Plus,
but-
it would also be getting kick-ins from Huntington Woods and Oak Park.
Yeah. Right.
That kind of a project, that wouldn't come out of the fund that we just voted in, the road infrastructure type
Well, we have that part of the slide.
bonds it was.
No, we have a wholly separate set of standards that we want to use that money for, and like I say, that we want to do for like the existing road network, making replacements there, water mains, sewer system, things like that. So it wouldn't be like for a restriping project. That would be interior to the city, fixing up what we already have.
But is
That's
there
a wholly
something
different.
to stop you from using it for something like that? Like on 11 Mile Stripe, what you're talking about?
Yeah, that would, like I say, that would probably be, this is the last time we did 11 Mile, I think we bonded for it, so we have a bunch of different options available to us for that. But again, we would try to getting as much road funding as possible for that.
Yeah,
from
that
outside
was
the
laying
agency.
pavement, though.
Yeah.
This would be
Restriping.
just restriping it.
And, yeah, as far as I know, what they're talking about now is just restriping. I don't see it being any substantial difference or anything like
There was
that.
no hardscape changes as
No.
far as I saw in the printouts they had from yesterday.
So 11 miles, not a county road, like 12 mile, or,
I think we own it.
It's broken out, it's kind of funny, at Woodward 11 is MDOT, and then our section of 11 Mile is cities. The intersection at Coolidge and 11 Mile is Road Commission, then it's us for a little bit longer for the northbound. And so it oversight changes for 3 different road agencies in between Woodward and Greenfield. It just depends on what you're touching.
Does the county go along with that?
Yeah.
we
And so
should
that's
see if
why
we
when
could
the
get 'em
county
to
redid the
trade.
intersection and just added the light, that's why that was a county project. Where it
Yeah.
was originally gonna be, because it touches 3 different communities and getting them all to coordinate. We all like each other, but it was much better to
When you're
have
talking
one
about
single-
spending money.
Yeah, it was better to have one single agency do the oversight for that, so that's a
Well-
county intersection.
I haven't gone to that meeting, so,
We have one
and I
coming up
know
here
we're
too.
off topic, but is that, again, a road diet with striping and
Yeah.
bicycle, just like what we're talking about on Coolidge?
Yeah,
Same
well,
thing?
to be determined, but yes, it's the same sentiment. You're talking about taking 4 lanes and putting them down to 3, and then adding whatever else you have room for. So there's 3 different meetings coming up now, and again, we're very much in the study phase of this, and it's funded through a grant from SEMCOG. But it is, yeah, Huntington Woods, Oak Park, and ourselves are talking about doing 11 Mile and Coolidge past 11 Mile, south of 11 Mile, as taking sort of the same approach to this.
But there wouldn't be
Right.
on-street parking on 11 Mile like
Right.
there is on Coolidge.
Yeah, so I'm not,
It'd be narrowed and there'd be bike lanes, because the road's not as wide as Coolidge, so
Right.
there wouldn't be the room for that.
yeah. and
But
I
are
don't-
they
I'm not
I'm sorry,
sure-
are they talking about all the way from Woodward to Greenfield?
Yeah, the whole stretch,
And then say down Coolidge, down to,
down to 696.
and 696, but I've heard, Oak Park is interested in going as far as 9 Mile. They've got plans to do a similar project on 9 Mile all the way into Ferndale. So.
Yeah, they have that, but the stretch of Coolidge between 9 and 10, according to the Decker presentation yesterday, there's too much traffic.
Okay.
That they wouldn't be able to narrow that, but they
Gotcha.
would want to do like an extra wide sidewalk on the west side.
Oh,
So
nice.
like they kind of have now on 9 Mile, there's an extra wide stretch on
Yeah.
the south side of the street. They would do that for bicycle traffic, just for that 1 mile,
Okay.
which is unfortunate because then it would connect to that proper bike lane that goes all the way to Ferndale.
Right.
So
Right.
it gets a little trickier there.
And so, yeah, so each of the participating communities are all hosting their own. So we'll have our turns coming up. We don't.
It's March 14th, right?
Oak Park,
That's
yeah,
right.
Oak Park went first. Yeah.
Huntington Woods probably just ended.
I don't know, when you restrict all this traffic down to what you're talking about, I mean, these roads were designed originally, their purpose was to get people from one side over to the other side, and when everybody constricts it,
Yeah. So it's interesting because there's plenty of data to support being able to accomplish that goal of just if you're strictly moving vehicles, that 4 to 3 lane conversions really don't have a delayed effect like people assume it is. The flip side of that is that people also assume that when we went through this phase in, the 60s and 70s of expanding a lot of these roads, that there was thought behind it. But it was really just, it was really just, it was a great way of devoting, as I'm your congressman, I brought back this amount of, jobs and this amount of money back to the district. And so road expansion. It's kind of what we're seeing with 75 and 94. So there's much more evidence now in the way that people are viewing these roads and shaping these roads, the modeling, the science behind it. I would say it's definitely more advanced than it was from the mentality that said widen it.
But you do know that it was narrow and then they widened it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now you're talking about moving it back. So
12 Mile the same way. If you look at some of the sort of historical views of 12 Mile over the years, it had several different configurations. It had a lane down the middle, it had no parking, it had some parking, it had, it went down to, now we're 2 lanes either way with on-street parking. So I know it's taken a lot of different forms too. And again, mentalities change. Somebody 50 years from now might be sitting in this room going, those people in 2020 or 2019 thought that, this was the end all be all, and now, now we've gotten smarter about it. Now we know this is the way to do it. It's, one up, one down. I don't know.
Job security for city planners.
It's one up, one down maybe. So I think we're doing a better. I think we're taking a better approach than we took in the 60s and 70s. And again, that thinking will continue to advance as we move forward. So.
Okay, my next question is these crosswalks that they tried and closed. Is that going to be incorporated into this new road diet?
Yeah, we do want to bring those back because the 3-lane street is, it's demonstratively safer for pedestrians, and so we want to bring back those crosswalks. Now, you don't end up with that blind spots created by 4 lanes, and that was the 2 instances we had of a person and vehicular incident, or 2 students got hit. In both cases, there was only a couple of moments, but it was enough, unfortunately, where the driver and the pedestrian didn't see each other because there was another vehicle in the way. And that
Right.
you won't have that with the 3-lane configuration.
But there's going to be parking, so a car's going to be there anyway. I mean, could
that part's not going to
potentially
change from what's now.
So
There is
that
still
could
gonna be
block
parking there.
somebody's view. And
What we want to do
and the poor kid is being prosecuted for something that obviously it wasn't a good idea to begin with. And now he's paying the price for it.
She means the driver that,
Yeah.
well, that can be figured out, like I say, but what we want to do is eventually, if this thing works and if it takes off, there'll be like a protected area for the pedestrian that would allow them to remain before they actually get into the street proper, that you can sit and make sure that there's nobody coming. So whether that's like a bump out, or even if at the beginning it's like a protected pedestrian area, kind of like we had with the other ones, where there were the cones, so you can get out past the cars and see if there was a vehicle coming. We would have that with the 3-lane as well. So you're not sitting behind a parked car and just darting out. And that's not good for pedestrians, that's not good for drivers either.
But
so we
primarily-
can overcome that particular issue of somebody being obstructed by a parked car. And again, we don't think the issue of somebody's vision being obstructed by a vehicle stopped at the crosswalk would be a problem either.
Are they going to educate the kids at least on how to use these crosswalks?
Not just kids. I've seen
Well,
all.
I
I've seen all
understand
kinds
that,
of
but
people,
the kids are
yeah.
the ones that are more vulnerable.
Well, the way it's configured too, with the crosswalk, there's the bike lane past the actual car park. So you have 5.5 feet of bike lane between cars are parked and the actual lane of traffic goes. So you already have, a full person length of space before you're even in traffic on the crosswalk.
But to your point, though, yes, education would go a long way on all of this.
We
Not only
didn't
for
have it
driver
before.
education. Well, we did, but it could certainly be improved because we saw people hit that button and just start walking out, like
yeah.
Because that's what they thought.
Right, but
Especially
that's-
the kids.
I mean,
Everybody's taught that
Can't-
the pedestrian has the right of way. I mean, we've
Sure.
all been taught that.
right, but and we were also taught though, don't walk into traffic. And so just because there's a flashing light
They
doesn't
push
mean.
the button.
I know, but if there's a car coming, you gotta make sure that you see the vehicle driver sees you, and before you start walking out into there, whether you're at an intersection or whether you're at a mid-block crossing, it's important either way to make sure that, you're using the head on your shoulders and not walking into a dangerous situation. You can be right. You can be every bit of right. You can have the law book in your hand, but if you get hit by a vehicle, right or wrong, you're still being hit by a vehicle. And
Well,
so education on
that's
all
the
regards is.
There's been a lot of near misses that didn't go to the hospital.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not just that people are stupid.
No, I don't. I'm saying it's not just kids. It's all
It's
sorts of
adults.
folks. Yeah.
I mean,
Because
adults have had near misses too.
I've had to lock it up a couple of times with people, that were my age,
Yeah.
But
jumping across on
if you're
food.
bringing them back, please at least go into the schools and teach the kids how to properly use them. Because I guarantee you they didn't know.
One thing I wanted to do prior to us just taking them offline was kind of put out like a little sandwich board or affix some signs of the pole. Just kind of, it sounds silly to say, but how to use a crosswalk. Push, stop, look, then proceed. Kind of a
Kids aren't going to look at
signage.
those.
I
Sorry.
hope that somebody does because
Well, maybe adults
the
will, but-
consequences of just assuming it could be bad for somebody. And
Well, I know, but it's your job to protect us all. And if, I'm just
Well,
saying,
no,
if you go into the schools and at least teach the kids, that helps a lot. At least the middle school and the high school, because those are the kids that are going to be walking by themselves, typically.
Sure.
And also,
drivers too. Drivers need to be educated as well on pedestrians. We have been in plenty of cities all over the place where you're watching, but they're not looking up, they're looking down, they're playing with something and they're just rolling through crosswalks. And I think we've all had that situation. I don't care where you were, where you're like, well, that guy's not watching. Just sit in the sidewalk, let him go by, and then we figure that out.
One
Are
of
you
the
gonna-
things that they definitely should consider doing is improving those flashers. Because
Yeah.
they're really in a horrible location. You
I'd
can't
like to
see them.
see them over the middle of the
which-
road.
I mean, granted, with it being a narrower road,
Yeah.
that might make somewhat of a difference, but those things,
Well, when
you
you're
know, they're
driving
this
down
big,
the road,
and-
you don't look off to the sides.
Yeah, you
I mean,
look-
that's not where your main concern is. And those lights are off to the sides. So a light in the middle of the road at least
I like what
that's what I look for.
Something like a mast arm or something like that. Because I don't want to put it in the middle of the road because I do want emergency vehicles to be able to utilize that middle lane
Right.
to
Well,
get
something
through,
overhead.
Like a mast arm, perhaps.
Clausen on 14 Mile.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Really?
Yeah, well, say I want to keep that middle lane
They have
open
islands.
for emergency vehicles.
Well, I mean, I mean the overhead, not,
Okay, so not on 14 Mile where they've got the respite areas with the mast arms that come out from the center.
Maybe they do come out from the center. But it would just be for reverse.
Yeah. Something from the angles.
Yeah.
I honestly thought they came from the side.
I thought, I heard that they
I'm
did.
not paying
Yeah,
attention.
on 14 Mile at least, like coming in, I know that there's
Right.
respite areas, like pedestrian respite areas, and that's where the mast arms, there's a pole and mast arms comes out
Yeah,
from.
I know they have an island there, but
Yeah.
people, I've heard feedback on that people that live in the neighborhood go like, we don't know what that's there for and what we're supposed to do.
Really?
But at least it's there, and, it is something that's very, very visible, and as you're driving through, even if you're not familiar with the area, you're kind of looking at it and going, is that damn thing gonna change, or it helps you pay attention.
Yeah, there are different options there.
Are
But
they,
I know they're a lot more money, probably.
Yeah, but so, I mean, there's safety to consider.
are you going to consider lights over the road?
Like on the mast arm, like we just talked about?
However you get them there, something that a driver would actually see. Like I said, when you're driving, you're looking down the road, you're glancing off into the distance, you know, to kind of know where your surroundings are, but you're not going, oh, there's a flashing light there. You don't do that. Because if you're doing that, you're going to miss what's in front of you. You know, if the car in front of you stops and
Yeah,
you're looking
I
over
mean,
here
yeah.
in case there might be a flashing light.
Right, well, we didn't come up with those just sort of on our own. There are those rectangular rapid flashing beacons they're used in a lot of places all over the place. They're a pretty standard traffic control device that we purchased.
But they didn't work.
There are different ones. Well, like you said, education, we'll continue to talk about it, but I crossed the crosswalk. I watched them work a lot of times too. I did it with, two toddlers in hand. I never had any issues. We waited, we looked, we hit the button, and we proceeded through, and,
I
cars
think
came to
they
a stop
have
for us.
something similar on 11 Mile in Royal Oak by Imagine. I don't know if they're a little larger though, but and it may be that there's nothing else around them either, that they are so much more visible than what we have. So it may be a size issue,
Yeah,
like you said.
well, it's possible. Like I said, if we could I'm not saying we're not going to look at something different, because we probably will. We'll figure out whatever does the best job possible for us. But again, I don't want to feel like, I don't want you to come away with the impression that, like, we just, on a lark, used something that we didn't think would work. This is RFBs they're deployed at lots of crosswalks all over the country and with results.
Well, regardless of how you decided to come up with what we have now, it didn't work.
In 2 instances,
So-
you're right.
I mean, 2 kids hurt in what short of a time period? That's unacceptable to me. I think
We both, we
they
jumped down.
caused them.
Yeah.
That's
I'd
right.
say
Okay,
I'm
but
not
then
disagreeing.
if they open them again, just because, oh, we got this road diet going now and that's what we want,
I guarantee there's a lot more thought that went into that than, we got a road diet, so this is what we want. There's a lot more that goes into this than just those couple of lines.
And forgive my fading memory, but is there a speed reduction going in with the lane reduction?
They're going to
too?
be 30. I think people, with the change in the built environment, you'll get people to actually do the speed limit, which will be its own.
That would be refreshing.
Which will be its own reduction, but not, going lower than 30. We just want to get people to that target speed, to get people down to 30 miles an hour like they're supposed to be going anyway. Yeah.
and those crosswalks, will they have clear paths across the street? Like, very visible,
Markings.
crosswalks? You know what I mean?
There's a model uniform traffic code is what I think it's dubbed, that actually says how those things need to be striped. And the way that we did that was the highway standard. They actually met every standard on the book to make sure that that's exactly how we do it. Because we were talking about something like maybe like colorful crosswalks or picture crosswalks or things like that, but the standards are very clear. You have to do those blocked boxes all the way across. You have the option of doing it blocks or like diagonals. And blocks, there's more paint, more visibility the way that we chose to do it because they were new and we wanted to make sure that people saw them. So those that probably, to answer your question, those won't change a whole lot because that standard is out of the city's hands and we have to comply to a state and federal code on that.
I don't know, to me, they just didn't seem that visible, that noticeable. I mean, they're visible if you're looking for them, but noticeable in the sense that, oh, okay, we don't have a light, but we do have a place for people to walk, so pay more attention.
Yeah, that standard's out of the locals' control. We have to comply with the standards on that. So those won't change a whole lot. It's going to be the white boxes going across.
But you can put in a flashing light over the road.
That we'd be able to do. Yeah, there's nothing that would keep us from being able to do that. Not that I'm aware of. I'm not, again, preface is saying not traffic engineer, but there's nothing that I know of so far that would keep us from doing that.
Okay, well, I'm asking you to do that.
Okay. All right. Like I said, we'll definitely look at it. Okay. Water main project, this one's, probably doesn't get as much attention, but it's an important one. So, as you remember, we dedicated ourselves to doing more infrastructure projects, even that complement the conversation we were having back in leading up to November. And so, on being able to do more capital water projects through the water rates, this is one of the first big projects we're able to do with that. So if you're familiar with Coolidge, the next street over is Kenmore and Webster. It's kind of it's a dead end right now. And so what this project will do is actually from Coolidge, bring it up to Webster and over and loop it. And so you got more redundancy in the system. You've got to be able, it's more reliable that way. When you shut a section off right now, you don't lose a whole spur. So quality improves, pressure improves, and reliability improves with this project. So we're pretty excited about it. We can do this completely in the green belts on Coolidge, so we're not breaking into the brand new road on Coolidge and nothing like that. And so it's a good project for us. We're excited. It shouldn't take very long. Like I say, we're hoping to have it start July 1. Hoping to have it done obviously prior to Dream Cruise is our goal here.
So would that work look sort of like what they were doing on Coolidge and Royal Oak further north, where they were working in the green zone in the middle?
Yeah, because they were able to maintain a couple lanes there, and on what they're getting ready to do on 14 Mile as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not money coming out of that bond issue, is it?
No, we haven't actually received that money yet. So the first time that'll show up on the city's taxes would be the July summer tax bill, and then we'll do some intermediate patches this year, and then do the planning and engineering for one of those half-mile reconstructs. But that'll be 2020 before we can actually physically start construction on something like that. So it's separate from that. This is in the water rates. It's
Right,
water
yeah,
rates are
you're
funding
right,
this project.
you're right.
And I take it that we're going to try and coordinate if we have a water rates project, we're going to try and coordinate that with also other like paving and things like that.
Yeah. And so
Kind of
that's
figured.
that's what we talked about. In fact, we'll look at the infrastructure. There's a project scope right there. And on the infrastructure millage, we're going to try to do just that. So when we talk, and like we talked about kind of leading up to last November, there are other road monies, infrastructure monies that are going to help make that millage capture go a little bit farther. So we're looking to capture about 1.1 million annually from the two mills with water monies, with sewer monies, and maybe even some Act 51 dollars. That's how we get to these half-mile projects that are sidewalk to sidewalk, where it's either new sewer or it's line sewer, definitely new water main, enhanced base to it, new sidewalks. It is a complete reconstruction that time. So the infrastructure dollars make those half-mile projects happen because they provide only about half the funds for that. And the rest come from, like I say, existing revenue sources within the city.
We continue to coordinate with consumers and DTE and all of those guys, because I know the state was saying something about that where they were making it more difficult to do that.
The state.
For whatever obstinate reason they have.
Yeah, the state's made, projects that have the projects that are gonna have like water tie-ins, your leads, basically, your residential tie-ins to that. The issue of lead, the state at the end of last year made that whole process a lot more difficult for us too. They changed the ownership parameters around, so whereas the city used to own up to your stop box, now somehow we own all the way up to the meter, which is inside the home, through your private property, through your foundation, up through your garage floor, or up through your basement floor. And again, the thought process behind it was to eliminate as many of the lead services as possible. But what they are still trying to figure out now is your public property stops at your stop box. And Michigan Constitution bars public funds from being used on private property. Well, if everything past the stop box to the meter is private property, how are we gonna own that and fund a replacement when I'm constitutionally barred from spending 1 single cent of the public's money on what is essentially supposed to be a privately owned piece of your home?
Would that be a special assessment?
They talked about, not special, well, they talked about easements, they've talked about special assessments, there's been a lot of different thoughts on this, but there's nothing definitive. This is one of those things that's gonna end up being litigated.
Wouldn't that bankrupt the city anyway? I mean,
It definitely makes projects more expensive,
I know
yeah.
my mom's house on Cambridge had a lead line all the way up until it sprung a leak about 3 years ago, and then the plumber noticed that it was a lead line running all the way up to the city, so we had to replace the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I imagine that everything else over there in, Mortensen, Pleasant Gardens is also lead line.
Yeah,
Street.
yeah, it changes by project, but yeah, we definitely have lead lines here.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of depends on when the city was, what section of the city was built, when the home was built, and whether or not they're still there. Previously, we had one stop box, when it was a lead line, we notified the homeowner, and it was their choice. Here's, we're gonna put your copper up to this point, and then you have to decide whether or not you wanna go any farther with it, and that's a plumber, that's your own thing. Surprisingly, we had a number of people that said, I have no lead issues in my home, I have no problems.
They're drinking out of those
Yeah.
bottles.
But they don't wanna spend more money.
Right,
I
and
mean,
sometimes it's
what
strictly,
about
they said
the
they don't wanna spend more
new
money.
construction? Did the city impose that on them? I mean, did they make the new construction contractors replace that? Or, well, some of them, they've torn down houses
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, and they run all new lines. They run all new copper lines anyway. Or some run PEX, the plastic. But no one's using lead anymore. You can't buy it, you can't use it, so.
right.
Yeah, so
But
no new constructions.
what
is
about
getting lead lines.
rehabs? Not, that isn't an issue for rehabs?
Only through the publicly held portion. Again, it was someone's choice as a private owner whether or not they wanted to replace the lead lines. So most did. Most on the rehab, most did, because they were running all new, period. New sanitary, or new sewer lead, new water lead. It's all brand new tap even. And so it wasn't, we didn't find that to be a big issue, but, no, more often than not, this is gonna cause some issues. We were actually, just by luck, since we wanted to do this Coolidge line anyway, there's nobody tapped off Coolidge. So it's not something that we need to address for this particular project, but in our next water main replacement line, or likely this is gonna be something that we're gonna have to try to figure out how to address here, are we gonna actually, pay a plumber to go reroute all these lines, because we don't have the in-house capacity to start going through a foundation and putting in a whole new line, so. It's one of those, again, we're waiting to see what approach the state takes to this. New administration, perhaps a new thought, but we've been very confident. We've been saying this at the local level, GLEWA, the Great Lakes Water Association, SACRA, our regional water association. Erosion controls keep lead from being a huge issue. That's the best protection you have is treating the water for erosion controls to keep the lead from actually interfacing with the drinking water itself. That's the best protection you have. And we do that. GLEWA's tested. We test annually. We publish those results. DEQ reviews all those results, and we don't have lead infiltration in the water. We can say that with 100% confidence. But state took a very different approach to this and put a lot of ownership on your local communities to address an issue that may not even be the source of a problem in the community, so.
This was because of Flint, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, there's no way of saying it any different than that. It was certainly a reaction statewide to the issues that were uncovered in Flint.
We screwed up, oh no, we better figure out a way to disperse the blame.
Yeah,
Well, they don't want to disperse the blame, they want to disperse the
Costs.
responsibility,
Yeah.
the cost.
yeah, it is cost. And again, there's a parts per million standard that was moved to be the most restrictive in the nation, but the parts per million calculation is not a science-based decision. They moved it to be the lowest in the country. There's no, know of any course of or scientific study that says, 10 parts per million is any better than 15. It's all worse than zero. It's basically is what you'll find out. So again, you're right, they made a reaction to the headline and created policy that doesn't address, what was potentially the real cause of the issue there. So, and now the rest of us have to sort of wade through what that means for us.
And if you got an old house, even if you replace everything going up into your house, if you've got lead lines inside, you have lead lines inside.
Yeah. Well, that's always been a flaw in the testing model is it's an end user
I'm
test.
just talking about.
Right. So you test what comes out of the faucet.
Yeah.
Well, if I've traditionally only been responsible for what goes up to the stop box, and now I'm even responsible for what up to the meter, there's still a host of pipes and solder and lead pack that could be in that home before you turn the faucet on and test that water. And it's good for a homeowner to know that. But when they send that off, and we come in, well, actually, the way it goes is we actually come collect that from the test sites. We're really hoping that test home conducted the test properly, and they have a good understanding of what their piping looks like within the community. Because if it's galvanized with lead pack, then there's a potential exposure there. And the water could have been and is pristine up through the point of delivery when it crosses over from public to private. But there's, plenty that could happen between those 2 points. And there's no spigot on your meter, so you can't go test directly at the meter. You have to go to a faucet. So it's always been a flaw with the testing model. So, okay. What's with that? Fun chat. And again, like we talked about, so the first year that we'll be collecting this, 2019 year, is we'll have enough in hand to start doing some pretty extensive road patching. So as some of you may recall, we have what we call a PASAR rating. It's PASAR. It's an acronym. I don't recall what it stands for, but it's the generally accepted road rating system. And where we have some issues that are fair, even to some areas that are poor, we can do sizable road patches better than the little tiny, 5x5, 6x6 areas there. Where we can make some good size patching in place that will allow us to upgrade the PASAR rating on that. So that's a good year one project while we are doing the planning and engineering for one of those half-mile projects. And then we can be shovel-ready by the time that next year rolls around. So I'm hoping to kind of, for the 10 years where this millage is in effect, be able to do that flip-flop model where we're always either building or planning for the next project, no matter when it is.
That's not the order in which they intend to do it, is it? Because I want to bump Wiltshire up.
Yeah, I think everybody, depending on how close you are or how often you drive one of those, I'm sure you'd like to see it come up.
Oh, I live on it, so.
Then they're all in there for different areas, like Wakefield, if you guys check your email on frequent, Wakefield, north of 12 has had a lot of water main breaks.
Yep.
It's a great contender for a new water main, which would then also be a good opportunity to do new road surface for it as well. I know Kenmore, right at 12, just north of 12 as well. They have issues with the road is very, very flat, and they've got a lot of surface flooding. So if we can engineer a better road surface that can capture more of that water without it being an issue from the residents and improves the sewer situation there, all the better. Tyler, Wiltshire, anybody that drives on Wiltshire knows it's a dentist's favorite road as far as shaking the fillings out of your
It's
head.
horrible.
Yeah, it is.
And there's too many cars going
really
down
is.
Wiltshire.
I tell you, my worry about Wiltshire is when we start doing that, that's such a beautiful drive. That canopy on Wiltshire it's one of my favorite views when I'm driving down the street, especially in the fall when the leaves turn. Driving down Wiltshire, it's just a gorgeous little tunnel, but a lot of those are silver maples. And
They're coming down.
well, unfortunately, there probably are.
Well,
A lot
we
of
have
those are very
oaks.
mature trees, and I'm very proud of what we did on Harvard. But driving down Harvard it's a strange experience when you're used to very tall trees all around you.
Yeah.
And not that I cut through the neighborhoods, but usually when I'm coming back from Westbourne. It's I go to Harvard and take it across, and it is. It kind of has that new subdivision feel right now until they start to mature. I will hate losing that on Wiltshire, that ambiance.
Well, a lot of those trees were taken down. There's a lot of trees on the properties. Those aren't
Yeah.
gonna be touched.
Right.
So, I mean, like, we've got huge oaks and maples and such, but, they went through and cut down a lot of those
Yeah.
on the easements.
No,
I don't look forward to the construction part
I
of
know,
it.
no one likes living through it, but the end result is usually pretty good. So, and I think that's the approach. I think most people are going to say that statewide. If the governor makes good on her fixing the roads, the amount of work that needs to be done near term is just going to be unpleasant for trying to get anywhere in Michigan for quite a while. It all needs to get done, and it needed to get done 10 years ago, but the amount of orange barrels that are going to be out is just going to be
It's
maddening.
been bad enough already. I mean,
Feels like it, yeah.
every road around, it seems like they had it blocked off,
Yeah.
half
Yeah.
forever.
Well, when you have to close freeway exit ramps
Yeah.
because
sure.
5x5 pieces of concrete have dropped to the,
Yeah. And I don't know where on that ramp it actually dropped from, but that's just the top of that
Yeah.
6-way interchange
Yeah.
there. I didn't hear this on the news, so I assume it didn't happen, but I would hate to be the car underneath there. I had a friend of mine actually actually it was the now mayor of my former community. She had a chunk hit a windshield while she was driving, cracked the windshield out.
You mean it flew up?
No, it
Or fell
came
down?
down. She was under it fell off the overpass, right near the windshield.
Yeah, that's been happening a lot, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
that's why you see the plywood under the bridges. When you're going under the bridges, and you look up and there's plywood. All that, the only intention of that plywood is just to keep it from making it all the way to you. That's the road surface is cracking, and that's a net. It's a hard net until they figure out what they're going to do with it. Michigan is very far behind in its infrastructure spending, and it's a $1 billion fix, and it's a huge monumental break out the thesaurus and keep on going type project that needs to all be done, and we're way late in doing it. So Michigan's
seems to me like infrastructure ought to be a national emergency.
infrastructure, a case could be made. And the way that we developed, like I say, if you look at some like I hate to be the anti-sprawl guy, but if you look at like the population of Metro Detroit from like 1970 to now, remains relatively unchanged. But the amount of infrastructure we now have for that same population is mind-boggling.
Yep.
I mean, we used to be fairly concise 40 or 50 years ago, but now, I mean, the suburbs just keep going. I grew up in New Baltimore for a good part of my life, and it's the outer ring is already past there now. And we have no extra people now. We don't have the humans to support that growth. We just all wanted to be able to do this a little bit more comfortably. And we have a lot of what now I would say is pretty unnecessary infrastructure from the standpoint of we have to pay to keep it going.
Well, we go like that, and then we go, and now I want a grocery store.
Yeah, but when they
Somewhere near me.
constrict these towns, the roads on these towns, all those roads that you just complained about, it's like, how do you get there?
Again, if you get to do most of the things you want to do in a pretty tight-knit area, then you don't need to hop on the interstate and go driving halfway across Metro Detroit to grab what you need. So, but it's mostly, like I say, it was driven by housing. It was that subdivision boom. That's where we needed more space, more space, more space. That's what drove a lot of these people farther and farther out.
I remember Coolidge when it was a dirt road.
I remember Hall Road. If anybody's familiar with Hall Road in
Yeah.
Macomb County, I remember it was 2 tracks to go from New Baltimore to, well, it's like 2 lanes to go from New Baltimore to Lakeside. Now Hall Road is just, I mean, you could land,
Yeah, like 10 lanes.
you could land,
Crazy.
something that would land normally at Selfridge right there could land there. You could, C-130s could land on Hall Road, if not for the millions of people driving up and down it at all times. It's wild.
Well, a dull bit of history here, but that's how Eisenhower sold Congress
Yeah.
on the interstate system was you can land a plane.
Every so often, there had to be like a straight mile, right? Yeah. So you can land a plane. Yeah.
And you still see it in California, where the Piper is getting ready to crash, and he's just landing on the freeway.
I've watched several fun movies where they end up having to land right there. Nick Cage did in Vegas.
With Wiltshire there, the first half mile you done was Harvard, right? So that was from Woodward all the way to Cass.
Yep.
So that's a half mile stretch?
Yep.
Thinking about Wiltshire, from Woodward all the way to Coolidge, because that's the whole stretch that really needs, that's that whole
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
That seems like a bit more than a half mile.
Probably so.
I heard it was gonna go to Mortensen.
We'll probably do it. We'll probably end up having to do it in phases. Like say Harvard's like we just had to stop.
Right.
Unfortunately, that was what we had the funding for. That's not to say the next block out is any better. There's
It's not bad.
it's
It's around
not
the block from my mom.
it's not great.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not great. But
Right.
I mean, compared to
Yeah.
some other streets,
Right.
I know that you guys you stop right there. But as far as chunking this out as half mile stretches, so it's not set in stone. It has to be a half mile. It might be a little bit further if that
Right.
road needs to be as you're already there,
Mhm.
tearing it all up anyhow. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be able to. We want to be able to, size these appropriately, but we're not going to be able to do. And we talked about this ad nauseum, kind of heading into November. We're not. 10 years is not a silver bullet, and 2 mills is by no means a silver bullet.
No, I know that.
Yeah, we're every 10 years. We hope to. I think what I say, basically, build a resume to ask again for the next 10 years, and we keep it going, we keep it going. And we know it needs to be done, but to fully fund it, we're kind of in the governor's position there. It's to fully fund it and tear it all up in the near term is just not feasible, unfortunately.
Okay.
But Harvard and Wiltshire have those lights at Coolidge, and I'm thinking, take the light out. I don't like all the traffic. I mean, there is a lot of traffic, and a lot of them speed. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not
Have they done
pleasant.
studies since
living there.
Crosslet doesn't really exist anymore, that if that light at Harvard is even necessary at Coolidge?
We did, we looked at it as we were kind of discussing what to do with Coolidge, and it was one of the ones that we had the option of moving it around. It wasn't necessarily specific to Harvard. There was some talk about it going to Oxford, but kind of being able to break up the flow of traffic in segments, it
So
does
it's still
serve a
better traffic
purpose.
control as opposed to
Yeah.
crossing.
You don't have the long stretches where people can get up to higher speeds than are posted there.
Right.
But
Okay.
one thing I'm excited about, that, actually our Mayor Pro Tem Baker has really been, has been phenomenal in, is we've got now a couple of those mobile speed signs that we can start to, kind of flash and deploy them in different areas around the city. And then we want to kind of keep going into and get a smaller version of that. Getting away from like the trailers, like some of the other communities have, we post the trailer and it does the flashing speed. But getting better data on how fast people are going and where they're going to. My wife and I have this conversation all the time. It's, she talks about cut through traffic, and it's like, honey, we live in the middle of the neighborhood. As soon as we leave our driveway to get to where we're going, we're cut through traffic to somebody. And so even when we pull people over and we do like very specific enforcement zones, it's almost always residents that are they're either to or from heading home. They either didn't realize how fast they were going, or just were in a hurry that day. So yeah, we have a lot of cut through traffic because because we're mostly residential.
That's what I'm concerned about with that road diet, though, especially like Wiltshire. There's the light. Harvard, there's the light. People saying, I've had enough of this, and they're going to turn.
Well, if you turn on Harvard in another direction, you got to go really
Yeah.
way off the path of Coolidge in order to get to another street that goes north and south. So they build their lesson road. What can never do that again? And even if you get to those other side streets, there's a stop sign every single time you hit Wiltshire, Beverly, or anything. That, again, I don't know.
You're making the assumption that people are going to follow that.
Well, I mean, it's certainly if
I
it's a
mean-
matter of commuting and you're trying to divert for all of a half-mile stretch because it's slightly narrow, which again, we don't even know if that's going to back up traffic or not.
Right.
By appreciable amounts of people are going to want to try and suddenly divert because they're still going wouldn't have to go north and south.
There's only 2 stop signs on Wiltshire between Coolidge and Woodward.
But that's exactly
Yeah,
why
but
we
that's-
do those studies. I want to know. I want to know I want to know what the situation is now, more than my anecdotal experience on on my street. I want to know what's happening now, and I want to be able to know what's happening when we're in the midst of this thing for the same reason.
So
What is the potential of this causing?
the studies will be going from 11 Mile to 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know only a couple of streets in, which initially I was a little hesitant about, but then that kind of makes sense, because people aren't, if you're not familiar with the area, you're gonna, oh, screw this, like you said, make a right off Coolidge and turn left at the first
Yeah.
intersection, so.
Right, because you could, like going down, well, depends on which way you're going, I guess, on Coolidge, but yeah, you might take that next light and say, let's get out of here, and then,
I don't know if you do to Jason. I don't know if you do it more than once though. If it actually yields the results that you think it will, or as a driver, and you're like, I'm gonna go. Any of these side streets must be better, and then you're like, no.
well, I know when I'm driving, I do it. If
Yeah.
traffic
Most
is
of the people that tell
bad.
you're not alone in that. Most people that tell me, yeah, they actually will cut through. I do it all the time. They kind of have that same mentality. It's like but that again.
Well, certainly.
How is it going to change? I want to know definitively through studies, how does it change from people taking that same approach now? Because certainly, going to 3 lanes, morning, 8 a.m. and 5 a.m. are still going to be no fun to be on the street. Coolidge now, going from one end to the other at 8 a.m. and 5 a.m. That's usually when I'm taking my kids to school and I'm heading home. It's no peach now. And so I don't know how many people now are getting sick of this and going, forget Coolidge, I'm going to the side street and driving through. Some people have told me that that's what they do, and again, I want to know how much it's going to change between now and then.
Well, it's similar to what's going on Coolidge up by the train tracks where they're doing all the water main construction and stuff's getting narrowed down and shut down, and so that whole interchange is a nightmare right now. Now, I often have to, when I do have to travel by car, I have to go north of there along Coolidge. I'm trying to get up to Somerset, and so I just take an entirely different route now because I avoid that area because I know that the traffic's bad. So if Coolidge gets slowed down to such a point that a regular commuter decides, I can't deal with this, they'll just take Greenfield or they'll take Woodward. Because no matter what, Woodward and Coolidge are still going to meet just a mile up the road anyway. So if anyone's going northbound on that stretch, they're just going to take a different road anyway.
Woodward's pretty bad though.
Actually, yeah, Woodward's
So
no
what-
peach at 5 o'clock. So I don't.
Well, that's called rush hour, and that's going to be true no matter what.
All right, all right. We're not solving. I do want to be very clear. We're
Woodward's
not solving.
got more than
We're not solving
direction,
rush hour
it's-
with this
it's a
thing.
nightmare, so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You look at your traffic thing at rush hour in Metro Detroit, and it's just you don't find many roads that aren't highlighted red. And it's basically like best of luck.
Once the hover buses come in, then
So-
we're good.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Which streets are they going to study?
I
All of
know-
them?
Yeah, I know off the top of my head.
Kenmore's one.
Kenmore's definitely one. Kipling's one too, because Kipling runs continuously between 11 and 12. On the other side, Beverly is one. But the blocks widen way out on east of Coolidge there. And so Beverly, being that first one off, is one that we're going to study too. And Catalpa, we're going to have, we'll put the ropes out on Catalpa as well to figure out the diversion.
How about Wiltshire? Because of the light.
Yeah, I know I'm not recalling all of them off the top of my head, but trying to get a good sense of where and if people are diverting is the goal of this. So that's the side streets are what we want to know. I don't know how many people are going to use the light, because you go to, the experience now, because I usually go in off either Beverly or Wiltshire to get to my house on Wakefield. I actually prefer Beverly just because I'm not waiting for the light, because I gotta wait until traffic.
But you can't get across.
On Beverly, I usually have more luck on Beverly, making the left into my neighborhood than I do at Wiltshire, because everyone's stopped there all at the same time. And so cars pile up on Wiltshire, and I'm waiting to turn left, and I gotta wait for all of them to clear, and I'm really hoping they do so before my red light clicks back in, and then I'm stuck for 2 cycles. So that's why again, anecdotal, of course, because just talking about me, but I avoid the lighted intersections for the unlighted ones if I'm making a left turn.
And they're not gonna do these studies in the summertime, are they?
No, we're gonna try to get them, we wanna get them done, next couple weeks here.
Right, but I mean, the follow-ups and everything,
We'll do on 6-month cycles, so we'll have a full 12 months of good data. So school year in, school year out, all types of weather. We'll have a full year of reliable data to evaluate this with.
during school time though. I mean, they're
Well,
not
for part
gonna
of the
do
year,
it.
yeah. For part of the year, yes. Part of the year, no. Well, again, with 12 full months, it'll be 9 months of school, 9 months of summer. We'll be able to compare.
How long of a time frame do they study it? I mean, each road, how long is that thing out there?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how long it takes them to get to whatever data they're looking for. I think they do like 24-hour deployments or something like that. If I'm trying to remember what we did on Coolidge, I think because it's several different places along those streets that we're going to measure from. So over the course of a couple of weeks, we'll cover it. But I don't know how long they'll stay in each individual area. There's traffic codes and standards and data and engineering behind all that stuff.
They
But
don't
I'm not sure
ignore the
exactly how
fact that
much.
there's school and, you know, there's days off of school, you know, certain days. I'm just saying, they're not oblivious to that, are they?
No, there's a whole professional field of study behind this. They're not oblivious, no.
I just know when they did the study over by La Salette, I don't think that was done by the city at all. They didn't seem to take into consideration school.
They did. Yeah, they issued an entire report on it that they, again, like I said, the traffic industry doesn't shut down when school's out. They have modeling that helps them predict school levels and non-school levels. So they can do those studies all year round and still get some, good amount of predictability in what the peak, non-peak, and year-round traffics are. They do that with modeling. And they did a whole, I think, several dozen page long report on that.
Okay.
I think that's chat. So I appreciate you guys asking questions throughout. Anything else uncovered here? Any other blazing questions, stuff we can throw out?
Going to breach a potentially unpopular subject here,
Some of my
but
favorite kinds.
just to get it out there. There's a feeling in some parts of the community, and I'm sure you're aware, but just in case, that the DDA director is overstepping what the charter of the DDA should be with the review boards and things like that. There is concern that the overlay district is going to somehow usurp the planning commission's responsibilities, and that that she's going to be bringing in people who, I mean, you have business owners who, okay, they own businesses in Berkeley, but they're not residents.
Yeah.
They do have a piece of the pie, though. They have a vested interest in the good for this city. But when you bring in outside advisors and outside consultants, there's some concern with that the overlay board is going to have members on it that aren't residents and aren't business owners and are just.
A lot of these people are strangers. They got no flesh in the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
agree.
yeah. Thank
Well,
you. You speak
yeah.
me very well.
So from a process standpoint, the design review board is going to be a recommending body to the planning commission, which is absolutely, you have to be a resident to be on those
Yeah,
bodies.
planning commission, yes.
Yeah. So they're only able to review like an application's adherence to the guidelines that are adopted by planning commission as well as eventually city council. So they would recommend, like, we think this person adheres to it well here, but not so well here. And then it goes to planning commission, and then planning commission is still the ultimate oversight body over a lot of these applications. And then there's even situations like, rezonings and special land uses, where then it even goes to council, which, we all know they're elected by the people. So it is a new way of approaching the design portion of this, but there are still layers in place with residents who, make their home here as planning commission members, and then in some cases, again, council members. So it still has to get through, there's 9, it still has to get through 16 residents in order to be approved in a lot of situations. That's 9 on the planning commission, 7 on
But
council.
why do they need that many layers? Why not just go to the planning commission like it always has been?
Interestingly, there's a school of thought that says that this would actually help speed up the process. And so when planning commissioners are looking at this, 140-page design review standards, and they're once a month, and they don't get through it all in 1 month, and they lose 30 days. The idea behind this design review board is that they would be able to meet intermittently between and put together a review that the planning commission then could utilize as part of its decision-making process. So it's supposed to make the planning commission process a little bit faster and a little bit more efficient with additional eyes on this topic. And so that's a school of thought. Now we'll see, again, this is, and planning commission made a recommendation on this to city council. City council still needs to look at it as well, but that's why it is to take some of the intermittent workload off the planning commission and make their jobs a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient by having additional sets of eyes on it.
Has there been that big a problem with planning commission not having enough time to do their work?
From a design and aesthetics point of view, we have, that's where we've seen a lot of our slowdowns. If you remember back to the La Salette application through the PUD process, one of the big knocks that we found was that whereas there were functional issues with the application that needed to be addressed and needed to be altered, we spent several meetings talking about the aesthetics functions and the design of the aesthetics of the board. If that part, if they can take a recommendation on adherence to the standards, that allows them to focus in more on the functional portions of the application. That's the concept behind that. That's the thought process that has been discussed. So again, I tend to like pilot projects. I don't know if we're going to give it, a timed period to see if it actually is.
Is that what this is going to be, a pilot project?
It's an option council has in front of them. And so if this is something that can be useful and it works the way it intends, then good, we've met our goals. If not, there's no need to keep something that's not working correctly.
I think the aesthetics, and this is my opinion, at the planning commission, that's a function of the personalities on the planning commission.
It could very well be. So you'll have people on design review board. You're never going to get away from people. So
right, but I'm just saying, if you are looking at that as bogging it down, I don't know that that's the answer. And the issue with the La Salette thing, they should have been shut down way before they were.
Yeah, we could have been
And
far more
that's
efficient with that whole
a
process.
different problem.
Yeah.
This design thing isn't going to solve that problem.
But if you think back, we spent a lot of time talking about materials and the look of townhouses and several things that weren't functional elements that we know were ultimately where they were lacking.
Because
so,
that's
yeah,
what the planning commission
we could have
like to do.
We could have made that process a lot more efficient, and I want to be able to get there in the future. And part of what the DDA is hoping to do, and part of what the planning commission members, after talking about this for several months, is make this entire process more efficient too.
I think with La Salette, some of that was planning commissioners looking a little bit further ahead in that particular project's process. Yeah, there were some delays on the city's part, but when you get an applicant that keeps coming back, and I'm sorry, I get really hot with this. When they keep coming back 3, 4 times, 5 times, however many times it was, and they don't have the paperwork completed, that's not the city's fault, that's not the planning commission's fault. You know what? You didn't do what you're supposed to do. we're forwarding this with a recommendation of denial and stop this.
Right, because the next guy is gonna do the same thing, why not? You know, till they wear them down and they get what they want.
Well, like I said, thankfully that's not how it went, so.
No, and,
No, but it
yeah,
went, what,
but-
almost
but-
2 years,
right,
when
but
it should have been shut down long
way,
before.
way too long, and a lot of it was the developer's fault.
So, yeah, so, I'm not disagreeing with you, but the portions that, where we've had the delays is
Yeah.
the only part I can work on,
Oh,
trying something new and different. And so this is just that, this is trying something different to see if we can't, create a body that the planning commission can rely on to make recommendations.
But when it's a body that is handpicked by one person, basically, is what I understand. I haven't
No,
read,
no.
I haven't
Say,
read
I'll
the
stop.
whole
No,
thing.
that's not the case.
I haven't
So,
read it.
Yeah.
Who's going to choose these people?
It's a board, it's a body of the city. So the city council is who appoints people to positions within, on city
And
boards
are
and
they gonna
commissions.
do that based on recommendations from somebody? Because they don't know everybody, they don't know these people.
Actually, in city, anything
When
that
they
comes
don't
before.
live here, they don't know them.
At least one does have to,
Yeah,
one resident at large.
yeah. And so, but again, I say planning, the city council will be the one to appoint these people to there, and the city council, right now, I mean, to all their credit, they do sit down when applications come in for boards and commissions, they reach out, they talk to that person, they try to get a sense of whether or not they're gonna be a good fit for what their task will be, so. Again, it's a city board, it'll be done by the city council, so to say the DDA director gets to put these people in place is I don't know who's out there saying, I know who's out there saying it, but they're not reading the
I think she's
text
gonna
correctly.
have a strong bit of
You know,
input.
I mean, people can think, but our council's no pushover. Council's independent, they make their own decisions, and that's what people elect them to do, and they fulfill that role.
But how do these people even know to apply for that job unless somebody says, hey, look, we have a job, it's not a job in terms of being paid. It's a volunteer job, I'm assuming. I'm not really sure why
Yeah, we
people
only
would
pay
want
board
to do
review.
it.
Board reviews the only paid job, same way we advertise for any position. We put the word out there, there's a vacancy, here's what we're looking for, we hope that you'll consider applying.
But if they don't live here, how are they gonna
Well, we're
know?
hoping to be able to find this talent within the community. I mean, that's still the hope. But if we have to go out, like our construction, a good example of this is our construction review board, or construction board of appeals. Because you're talking about looking for specific, like, industry professionals, it's one of the only boards that we have on the books right now that don't actually have to be specific residents. And so, again, we if we need to, if somebody ever comes before that board, we have to go out and solicit and try to find professionals that fit that specific build, so.
So what are the qualifications for this
I
particular?
have to look more back, I have to look at, I can't rattle, I don't know them off the top of my head, but, I know council's looking to, it's not gonna go back in front of council until I think the April 1st meeting is the next time that they'll have to talk about the design review, potential design review board. So again, this board isn't in place yet, the ordinances aren't in place yet.
Right, but there must be some sort of idea
Yeah,
put forth.
there is, like I said, I just don't know off the top of my head, I haven't had a chance to sit down and go through
Because
them.
all the other boards, except for the construction, the building.
It's Construction Code of Appeals, yeah.
Right.
That's the only one we have on the books right now that
Yeah.
doesn't require
Everybody,
residency.
all the other ones, I know for ZBA, that's based on state law, that it has to be open to pretty much a cross-section of the community, of the residents,
Yeah.
and so you don't have to have any specific talents in the industry.
No, but I can understand in certain circumstances, you may want that, but you should also have, people who don't necessarily have the formal education, if that's,
Right. And I think that's the approach we take with planning commission. We don't look specifically for any type of you don't have to be so many architects, so many engineers, so many builders. You don't have to have something like that. There are professions that lend themselves well to it, but at the same time, it's good to just have, people that just look at this purely from their residence hat and say, does this work or does this not work? But again, so this board will be a recommending body to the planning commission, which in a lot of cases are a recommending body to the council. So again, so getting that flow out and their ability to create policy doesn't exist. So the board can't do that. It still has to go before the planning commission to enact any zoning changes, adopt this board, and then again, a lot of those things have to also go to city council too. So there are plenty of resident built boards in place for this body to make any kind of difference or change or anything like that.
So they won't be able to administratively approve anything?
No,
Yeah.
planning commission reduced quite a bit of what was being talked about as potential for administrative approvals. They reduced quite a bit of that in their recommendation to the city council. I know some of the city council members were also looking at it as well. So they still want to try to default, go to the planning commission, let the planning commission look at this. It's 9 smart residents who kind of know what we're looking for as a community.
But they will be residents, not necessarily,
Planning commission members, yeah.
planning
Yeah.
commission, but
Well,
I mean,
the hope and the dream is to find industry professionals that also live in the city.
But they don't have to be.
They don't have to be, yeah.
for the review board.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want anybody else coming in and designing our town for us. It should be what we want. And you know what? Why can't we be wrong if that's what we as a community want?
What do you mean by
Too
wrong?
many times, like this diet, this road diet, it's like, oh no, you got all these reasons professionally why it should be such and such. And it's like, well, what if we just don't want it? Oh no, you need it, blah, 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 Well, why can't we just be wrong and have what we want, even though somebody thinks it's wrong?
I don't know about wrong. I don't know about the use of wrong there. I don't, if it goes through a community conversation, if it goes through planning commission, if it goes through council, and
But the
that all
design,
reflects our community. I don't think we're wrong there. It's
the
what we
design
want.
board, though, that's not necessarily a community board, and that's my concern.
But their only task is to recommend things to the planning commission, which is a board of residents.
Right,
And
it's
so
just
again, I don't
easy.
think we're wrong if that's what we want, if that's what works well for Berkeley. I have a hard time looking at it as wrong.
So as long as all their role is confined to recommendation, then I see what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense to me. Where you possibly want someone with a little more educational qualification for that role, especially if they're just recommending. They're not actually making the final decision where it has to look this way, or it has to do that, or it has to do this.
But if they're professionals, there's going to be strong incentive to do whatever they tell you, take their recommendation.
Right, but it would still be a Berkeley resident on a Berkeley board that would be taking that recommendation and saying, you're right, and we're gonna go ahead and do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize any of members of our planning commissioners as just being shrinking violets. They take, and they're not just gonna say, well, this board told us we had to do this, so let's do it.
No,
They are they look at everything with a very critical eye. We got a great board. We really do. It's a great group of people. Okay.
We've just, we've been bitten by administrative approvals
I
and things
understand.
like that.
Yeah, I think the planning commission had the same concern, which is why they ended up shrinking it for their recommendation to council.
I think they were pretty irritated with one particular case.
And it does seem
We've all got
like,
our own cases that are still a bug in our crawl, I'm sure, yeah.
this does seem like the DDA director tends to be an advocate for these people coming to the planning commission, even to the city council. It's kind of like, it does rub me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
she's supposed to be an advocate for,
The DDA,
Yeah.
not individuals in the DDA.
but part of the process for Downtown Development Authority is to try and bring businesses in to develop your downtown. So it, it's half and half, you know. I'm not putting it right. I'm talking about the hair salon
Well,
that's going
yeah,
in
in
the
that
old
case,
transmission shop where she
She
was.
does advocate for them to, quote, my words, violate the code, because it works and we need it. It's like, no, your job shouldn't be to advocate for something
Well-
that isn't allowed by our code.
I think if I remember correctly, it was a zoning board of appeals
Yeah,
issue. And so, you know, advocating for the business, but not necessarily to break it, just to be allowed a variance that is, you know, that could potentially be allowed for if it meets the standards in place. I think if I'm remembering correctly,
It clearly didn't meet the standards,
Zoning Board of Appeals agreed. They didn't allow it, they denied that request.
but yet she advocated for it. See, that, I have a
To-
problem
To
with
Paul's
that.
point, it's partially her role is to try to locate businesses within the DDA, be an advocate for them, in that board. But again, that's why it's great when it goes in front of resident-based boards is, you know, taking a non-advocate role. Does it meet the standards for variance or does it not? That's again why I think board approvals were favored over administrative approvals, is so that it goes in front of a resident-based board to make a decision for does it meet the standards or not. So
Do we
that's why
have
those
anything-
protections are in place.
in place, because I'm thinking of the Green Lantern deal. Actually, I'm thinking sort of Doll Hospital, really. But when Doll Hospital went up for sale, could the city have bought the house that Doll Hospital owned and turned that into parking, which it's zoned for?
Yeah, there's nothing that would have stopped us from that, yeah.
So why didn't they?
It was not really offered to us that way, and we weren't really,
But you have to be proactive, don't you? You see, you have a
I think
parking
there's some
problem.
I think there's some other
So-
options we have for that spot.
If the city had moved forward with that, then you'd have a whole bunch of other citizens out there saying, how much of our tax dollars did you just
Oh,
spend on a house to
Well,
knock
yeah,
down?"
you get into,
Absolutely,
yeah, sometimes you
yes.
get into,
All that,
yeah,
so
sometimes
I
you get
mean-
into the court
No,
of
but
public
if there's
opinion there.
a known
But-
problem,
Yeah, and so I think there's, like I say, I like to think there's a better way of handling it than just taking like that one house. I'd like to see parking there increase without having to take houses. And so you've got some
but-
space there, it's just finagled
if
strangely.
it was already zoned parking,
Yeah, and that was somebody,
why not?
you know, back in
We just,
I mean, why would you zone it parking if you didn't see a need for it to become
no,
parking?
there's undoubtedly a need there. Whether or not the city was the best person to step in and
But
demo
nobody's gonna
houses.
buy that property and say, oh, I wanna put up a parking lot. That wouldn't benefit, it would
It
be a
depends on
stupid
the case of
business.
what went into the Doll Hospital.
Yeah,
The-
a private business could absolutely buy it and say, we need more parking here, we're gonna go ahead and put that in. Especially if they find out the zoning work has already been done, you know, a generation ago. It's very, very likely to happen that way.
Okay, a generation ago and it's never changed yet, but we still have a parking
Well,
issue.
it's only had one owner up until this point. So it's
when did they rezone that? That was,
like in the eighties is what I heard, like
Late
86 or
80s.
something like that, yeah.
but
I think there's a better way, you know, I don't like losing houses to parking, personally, I'm not a fan of that.
But that was
You've got
not your
space.
decision. That,
I-
that house was zoned parking,
I don't,
you know, so long ago. Well,
I'm not saying
my
it came to me
thinking,
and I said, no, I don't wanna paint
No,
that
I
picture at all.
understand that. You're
We
just
did not, to
stating your preference.
earliest question, we did not actively seek it out and try to buy it from Jack and say, this is gonna be parking here from now on.
And I'm curious as to whether or not the DDA director encouraged the owner, I don't even know if that's owned or leased, the Doll Hospital, the new tenant, I guess it's,
Tim bought it. He
Okay.
purchased it, yeah.
all right. Well, did anybody encourage him to buy that house, that lot that was zoned for parking, to give him adequate parking and perhaps even shared, you know, you could make some money.
Was he given the opportunity
sure.
to also?
I don't know
You
if
don't
Jack
know
and
that.
Michelle and that even talked to him about also buying that house or not. That's a good question, I'm not sure.
That's the kind of thing I think she should be doing, you know, encouraging. She can't say you have to do it, but she can certainly encourage it, just like she's encouraging other things, you know, through the ZBA and through the planning commission.
Yeah, we can always be doing more and different, that's for sure.
And I'd love a restaurant to go into Minuteman.
Oh, the
What?
long, I like that cobblestone building. I know it's WMLS, but it's a nice building too.
Down across the street from the awards place or something on 12 Mile. I always just thought that would be, I liked going there when he was open as a printer too, but it just has a restaurant flair. We need a Mexican restaurant here.
Yeah, so my wife, she'd love to see that. That's her next big hope, is that something gets redeveloped into a Mexican restaurant.
I would go for that.
I loved margaritas. When I worked in Lathrop, it was like probably once a month. It was everyone throw money in the pot. You know, someone's making a run out to margaritas, and we're gonna get some food.
Well, Las Cazuelas in Southfield now over by my wife's office, and that's pretty good. It's, it's just like street, like cheap Mexican.
Good stuff. Yeah. All right. I don't want to keep you guys all night, but I appreciate you coming to the chat. Thanks for anybody that hung out this long and watched from home. So thank you so much. I'm looking to put another one together in about 3 to 4 months. I like to do about 4 days a week.
Do you have a topic on hand?
I don't have a topic on hand for next time.